Hey everyone, this is Nick and welcome to your Linux and open source news show. This week I'm incredibly happy because Microsoft just did a little interview talking about the future of Windows, and it looks like they're going to shoot themselves in the foot yet again with Windows 12, which means more Linux growth. So we'll talk about that. We also have the release of Mint 22.2, the release of Debian 13, but we also have Google terminating Steam on Chrome OS, which further cements the fact that Chrome OS is not going to linger around for too long, and a bunch of other stuff, including this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. It's your all-in-one platform to create, publish, and manage your website. Squarespace has really easy tools to make sure that anyone can end up with a really nice looking and well-optimized website, no matter if you know how to code or not. They have what they call their blueprint system, which lets you pick from a variety of templates that are pre-built and will suit any type of website, whether it's a simple blog, an online store, a video platform, whatever. All these templates are optimized by default to give you good SEO, but they also add some SEO-specific tools on top of that to make sure that your website just doesn't end up on the last page of Google. On top of that, to go further, Squarespace has their own design engine to create your own pages. You can just drag and drop elements where you want them, you can change all the colors, the fonts, you can just tweak the templates however you want. And once you have something you like, you can add extra features like your own online shop with a payment system, you can design your own logo from Squarespace, you can book your own domain name to have an easy to remember address. So check out squarespace.com/TheLinuxExperiment or just click the link in the description below and you'll get 10% off your first website or domain purchase. So, if we wanted Linux's market share to go up even faster than it's currently doing, well, we might have yet another opportunity for that, because Windows seems to be about to shoot itself in the foot yet again. The VP of Windows and Devices at Microsoft gave an interview. I watched it, it was rough, it's a lot of nonsense with marketing buzzwords and tech bro language that you would hear at an AI convention. There are some things though in there that will definitely make a lot of people run away from Windows. First is the use of voice commands as a primary way of interacting with a computer. Not going to replace mouse and keyboard, but still a prominent way that they want to push to talk to and interact with your PC. Something that if you've ever worked in an open plan or open space office, you know would be an absolutely atrocious idea. Imagine tens or hundreds of workers all yelling at Copilot to do something for them in the same room, and you know why this is a terrible idea. Second, this executive says that the system will look at your whole screen and determine the context of what you're doing so it can answer your questions better, presumably with AI. So you also have a strong privacy invasive feature, much like what Microsoft is currently pushing with their Windows Recall feature. He also said that the next-gen Windows PCs, so presumably Windows 12 and devices made for it, will be able to hear what you hear and see what you see. So again, definitely some always-on listening or recording kind of spyware in there. Finally, he says Windows will be increasingly agentic or agentic, but I'm gonna say agentic as in agentic AI, of course, saying Windows will increasingly use a mix of local computing power and cloud computing power because local computing is just not enough to perform the tasks the LLM needs to do. So to sum up, it sounds like your PC is turning into a terminal for Copilot, which you will talk to, which will record and listen to everything you do on your PC and send that to the cloud to Microsoft, which is a future that I'm sure a lot of people do not want to live in. I know I don't. And this gives Linux a big opportunity again if this actually materializes for Windows 12, of course, because this was just a nonsensical jargon of buzzwords, so maybe this is not at all what they're going to ship. But if this is what they end up shipping, then we're gonna gain a lot more users, and that's good. Now, Debian 13 was released at the end of last week, 2 years after Debian 12. Of course, it is a major change over its predecessor. It comes with GNOME 48, with Plasma 6.3, with the latest versions of LXDE or XFCE, and it updates more than 44,000 packages with 14,000 new packages in the repos and 8,800 packages being removed. The important changes I already covered in a dedicated video on the channel, so I'm not going to spend too long, but there's RISC-V as a architecture being supported. There's the removal of running Debian 13 on 32-bit systems. There's also apt3, which is far more legible in the terminal with more color coding. You also get an apt modernized sources command to transform the older .list files to .sources file, which should be a bit more secure in how they handle their authentication keys. You also get HTTP boot in the live images and the installer, and a bunch of other things. It is a big update to Debian. It is going to be the basis for a bunch of other distros. It is going to run on millions and millions of servers everywhere. I already covered all of that in a video. Check it out in the description. And if you want to see if it's a good candidate for a desktop, which it really can be, go check out that video as well. Now, we also got the beta for Mint 22.2, which is another nice update. Still based on Ubuntu 24.04, but with its hardware enablement stack kernel. They added fingerprint authentication throughout the whole system using FingWit. There's improved Wayland support for Cinnamon, although it's still not the default or fully fleshed out. You can expect the Wayland session to become maybe more prominent in the Mint version that will be based on the next Ubuntu LTS. You also get a blue tint across the whole theme to better match potential libadwaita apps, which should also be much better integrated thanks to libadapta. So they should use the right window controls, they should use some hints and colors that you use throughout Mint. We'll have to test that and see how it looks. There's also an improved main menu, there are changes to the default apps, although those are minor. And of course, people who prefer using XFC or Mate also get the latest updates to these desktops as well. This likely means Mint 22.2 will release in early September if everything goes well. Generally, between a beta and a final release, they have a few weeks. Of course, I will give it a shot on the channel as well to see how it evolved. Now, it doesn't look like a big update in terms of features or changes in Cinnamon itself or in Mint itself, but it's still a really important distro. It's one of the most used and most recommended ones out there, and so every change made to it just improves the experience for a lot of people running Linux. It's always nice to see. Now, if we needed one more proof that Chrome OS is a doomed operating system, Google will end support for Steam on Chromebooks in 2026. Steam on Chromebooks was never moved past its beta stage, and it now will display a message saying that it will end on January 1st, 2026, and that all the games you installed through it will be removed after that date. Google used to maintain a list of 99 compatible titles, although I'm pretty sure that you could use Proton to run the entire catalog that is playable on Linux, so virtually almost every Steam game. Maybe there was something in Chrome OS's weird architecture that made this not feasible, but in the light of Google now replacing Chrome OS with an Android-based system, or at least starting along those lines, it makes sense to stop working on Steam for Chrome OS. They are basically just abandoning ship and cancelling every single initiative out there just to make sure that their efforts are focused on turning Android into a suitable desktop OS. Now, as much as I think Chrome OS is a terrible operating system and you'd be much better running any Linux distro than that thing, it still sucks for users. It costs nothing to Google to leave that running and leave all those games installed. They did not have to do anything with that. I'm pretty sure the Steam updates were provided by Valve, not by Google. So why would they have to remove everything that users have installed? They could have just left that up and running until Chrome OS actually sees end of life. I don't quite understand that. Now we have a progress report for Elementary OS this week as well. So first, they redesigned their Bluetooth settings to clearly separate the devices you've connected to and paired with, and the devices you never interacted with. This update also fixes plenty of issues in the Bluetooth settings, like device duplication, names not being shown properly, and the like. Code, the Elementary OS text editor, now lets you clone GitHub repos straight from the editor from the project's menu. Their terminal app now will warn you about various options that you might have in commands that you copy-pasted into the terminal. Anything that is a force option, a skip confirmation option, will trigger that warning, just to let you know that this is going to do something, not ask you to do something. So as usual, you can disable those warnings if you know what you're doing. It's just a checkbox in the warning itself. As per what's coming next, there's a new default map app coming called Atlas, which will also be used to improve all the stuff related to locations, like when you enter a location for a meeting, for a task, or anything in third-party apps. Their window manager is also receiving some experimental work to see where they could add translucency and blur. So for example, the dock's background or the Alt-Tab switcher could be translucent with background blur. That dock will also become visible in the multitasking view, so you can start apps directly on the right workspace, much like what you can do in GNOME from the activities view. You just press super, you drag app icons straight onto the virtual desktops that you want, and you set up your environment. Elementary OS will very likely let you do kind of the same thing. Finally, there's Gesture Controller, which is the new way of handling gestures on Elementary OS instead of Touch Egg, for their Wayland session. For X11, it's Touch Egg. It's the best implementation of gestures on X11 that has ever been developed. And on Wayland, you will get Gesture Controller instead, which will fix a bunch of issues and add a few new gestures as well. I think it's looking good, and I'm glad they're taking a look at the look and feel aspect of Elementary OS. I sort of like how it looks, but it's mostly because it's well polished and unified and coherent, but I think the icons are starting to look a bit dated, the theme is starting to look a bit dated. Maybe translucency and blur can add a little flair to that. It's not going to fix the dated look and feel issue, but it's going to improve it at least until they build maybe a new theme or a new icon theme, which I think they really should do for Elementary OS 9. This is just not up to the modern taste of most people, I think. Now this week we also got more progress on the Orion browser being developed for Linux. They revealed what they call Milestone 2, which now apparently has performance parity with other WebKit GTK browsers, which in my opinion isn't a great positive, because these other WebKit GTK browsers kinda suck in terms of performance. For example, GNOME Web is just way slower than Firefox or anything Chromium based. In terms of features though, the browser lets you drag and drop tabs outside of the browser window, it will restore your tabs after you close and reopen the browser, and there's initial support for vertical tabs in the sidebar. Browsing history is also there with bookmarks as well. It can all be searched through. The Web Extensions API is also supported, meaning that at least this browser will have an advantage over GNOME Web, which is support for extensions, which is kind of important for a web browser. Hopefully they open source that part of their code and this can be reused in Epiphany later. The next steps will be adding more complex tab management, presumably with tab groups, building the web extensions infrastructure, but also bringing an install mechanism for these extensions as well. You cannot download this milestone specifically, there is no public build that you can try, and I'm pretty sure that the first public builds will be limited to people who actually pay KDE, the company behind it, for their search engine, but maybe also for their Orion browser. Of course, I lost a lot of excitement when I heard that they matched performance with WebKit GTK browser, so GNOME Web, because that's not a good performance level at all. The last time I did some benchmarks, if I remember correctly, it came on really below Firefox, which already comes below Chromium. So if you're matching the lowest performer out of all the options, you're not really doing great. It's just the first steps, we'll have to see where it goes. They also said they wanted to open source a bunch of stuff, so maybe some of the stuff that they open can be reused by GNOME Web as well to improve other browsers, so we'll have to wait and see. Now the CEO of GitHub has resigned this week, and Microsoft decided not to replace them. Instead, they will absorb GitHub more into the existing Microsoft hierarchy. GitHub is now reporting to Microsoft's Core AI division, which tells you everything you need to know about how Microsoft views GitHub. This is a source for code to train their models on, and a source to sell AI assistants to developers whose code is going to be used to train the AI that they pay for. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella said that these internal organizations matter are meaningless to their customers and competitors, which is not true at all. It is a weird way of saying, hey, don't look too close, it's fine. But when you look at what Core AI is building inside of Microsoft, it's all about Copilot. It clearly shows GitHub is going to be losing some independence. The entire platform is now reporting to the same business unit as Microsoft's own developer division and all the various AI teams under Microsoft's chief technical officer. Honestly, I do understand why people still use GitHub. It is the best, probably the best code hosting platform out there. There are other options, but you either need to self-host, or they're paid for, or they just don't have the same breadth of features or discoverability. But the problem is, this is now a fully integrated Microsoft product whose sole purpose is to push Copilot as a product and to train Copilot's AI on your work. I don't think it is ethical to keep building code on GitHub right now, but I also don't see how most people can get out of GitHub. Now, LVFS, the Linux vendor firmware service, is calling on hardware makers to start contributing to it, code or man-hours. As LVFS has grown to become the de facto way of providing firmware updates to Linux systems, it also means bigger infrastructure, bigger storage, and bigger man-hours, which means, you guessed it, it needs money. The project lead published their sustainability plan, and right now the Linux Foundation covers the hosting for the project, with Red Hat paying for the lead developer's time. But as LVFS grows, this just cannot scale properly. It really is a big thing. This is millions of files being stored and downloaded and uploaded by users and by vendors. And so they're introducing a fair use quota that is tied to how much you sponsor the project. If you don't sponsor anything, for free you will get 50,000 monthly downloads and 50 monthly uploads. That's probably enough for most companies distributing their firmware on LVFS. They won't have to pay anything. Just the companies building hard drives, SSDs, or network controllers or stuff like that probably won't publish more than 50 firmware updates per month and probably won't get that many firmware downloads either. Now, companies who exceed this quota will be reminded that they're expected to contribute, but they won't be forced to do so. They won't be locked out, they won't be made to pay anything, because they don't want users to not receive firmware updates because a company is a bad actor. Still, starting December 2025, vendors on the free tier will start getting those warnings, and they won't get detailed analytics anymore. In April 2026, certain custom APIs will be limited to vendors who pay, presumably to automatically upload firmwares and stuff like that. Now, if it sounds like the biggest, richest vendors should pay their fair share, then it absolutely is, and it's kind of funny to see that in today's world where everyone absolutely refuses to take the biggest, richest people or company and ask them to pay their fair share. So having that in LVFS is, I think, pretty neat. But it's not chump change that they're asking for. The base tier is $10,000 per year on top of a Linux Foundation Silver membership. It's not small change, and the bigger sponsorship tier is $100,000 a year plus that same Linux Foundation membership. Now, it presumably doesn't concern a lot of vendors, but I don't think it would be too insane to have Intel and AMD pay a little bit for that service, which they do derive a lot of benefit from, because let's remember, LVFS might work for us desktop users, but it also works for server consumers, in which it is a major actor to make sure that vendors can distribute their firmware. Having those companies pay a little bit to make sure this service works doesn't sound too crazy. Now, the Nvidia drivers 580 were released in stable form this week. This is another important update for most Linux users with an Nvidia GPU, because it once again improves Wayland support with the first in, first out protocol on Vulkan to ensure that things are drawn in the right order and at the right timing, in sync with your display refresh cycles. It is a thing that both GNOME and KDE currently support, although most other compositors apparently don't support that protocol yet. It will definitely help with gaming as well. There are plenty of smaller features and changes, including bug fixes for some VR headsets, some HDMI displays, there's support for single buffer GLX apps running with X-Wayland, which should also help with performance with non-Wayland native apps, and a lot of smaller bug fixes. Now, generally, drivers, you don't need to update immediately on Linux when something new comes up, but with Nvidia, I think it absolutely is the case. Nvidia level of support on Linux is not that great, especially if you run Wayland, but it is improving fast with every single update. You do not want to miss out on an Nvidia drivers update if you rely on that, because they absolutely improve the experience in every little detail. Now, this week we also saw the release of the KDE Gear compilation 25.08. It is a smaller update to a bunch of the default KDE apps than we usually see on KDE Gear, but this is summer, so it's understandable. If you've complained in the past about the resource usage of Econody, which is the backend for emails, calendars, tasks, contacts, basically everything that runs with the default KDE personal information management suites, Contacts or Mercuro, the developers have some good news for you. They have reduced memory usage for a bunch of these Econody resources by 75%, so that's gonna use a lot less RAM. Other changes include Dolphin. It now lets you search either using file indexing, which is obviously faster. The system builds over time an index of all your files and folders, and searching through that is just simpler and easier. But you can also default to using a simple search, which is a basic recursive search that is much slower but could include more results. Now, if you've installed kfind, you can also elect to use that instead straight from Dolphin, and you even have a small install button if you want. The View Mode button also got more options in its little menu, so it's faster to configure the current view in Dolphin. NeoChat, the Matrix client, now lets you create polls and open a context menu for each message thread for better conversation management. There are also updates to the screen sharing tool KRFB. There are updates to KOrganizer, to the Angelfish browser, to Cleopatra, to KDE Itinerary, and to some edutainment apps like KHangman or Articulate. Now, it is a smaller update than usual, but it's still super cool to get those kind of small feature updates in the apps that you use every day. Dolphin, for example, is already a fantastic file manager, but getting even more options and more search options in the filters is really great. Econody resource usage being reduced just like that for free. You can just update your system and get better performance. That's also really cool. So always love seeing those. Obviously, your distro will or won't give you those updates depending on its update policy. And let's conclude by talking a little bit about AI companies. Some of them are starting to really quake in their boots a little bit because there was a recent lawsuit that I mentioned a few weeks ago, which opened the door to multiple class action lawsuits against AI companies. The specific case was authors failing to demonstrate that Anthropic had pirated copies of their books, but this still opened a class action lawsuit against Anthropic because it was still proven that they had pirated a bunch of books. Companies that work in the AI field are apparently horrified at the idea of being pretty much wiped off the face of the earth. Anthropic, for example, petitioned to remove the class certification from this lawsuit, because if this happens, the company could face billions of dollars in damages, meaning they would probably just go bankrupt, and it is likely other companies would be doomed too. They called the previous ruling an error and they asked the courts to intervene now, but this could be the death of AI as we know it, basically. Or maybe it could at least make sure that AI companies pay their fair share to authors and creators of the works that they used to profit. Now, I think this would be entirely fair. I don't necessarily want these companies to disappear, but I want them to pay authors and creators for the content that they use, or at least to have the permission to use it for free if the authors and creators don't have any problem with giving that away for free. But they need to get consent and they need to pay if the authors want them to pay, which is not what they're doing. And all the defense that they're putting out currently is, but if we have to pay, then it's gonna cost us money. Which, yeah, and if you're not sustainable without stealing everyone else's work, then you shouldn't exist as a company. You're doing the Napster thing, basically. You should not be allowed to exist if you make profit of others people's work and you're not paying for that work. That's not how the world works. And AI companies just have not provided any other defense than that. And fair use doesn't really come into play here either, because it was designed for an individual person making a critique or a derivative work of something that could be protected. So for example, a YouTuber critiquing a new movie, that's fair use. Someone making a book review, that's fair use. Someone reading your book, synthesizing it, and giving that out on a mass scale with millions of books, millions of movies, millions of TV shows, and creating derivative works on a mass scale is not the same thing as an individual user spending the time and effort to make that thing themselves. It should not be judged in the same way, and hopefully it won't be. What is fair to use, though, is the devices from today's sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. Now, you all know about Tuxedo if you've been listening or watching anything I've done for the past 3 years. They've been a super regular sponsor of this show, but also of the entire YouTube channel. They make laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed. You've got a great range of devices which will suit every price point and every need, and I can only recommend them. I only use their devices. Everything you see, hear, or read from me is done on one of their laptops. All the stuff I do for gaming is also done on one of their desktops. It's all running Linux. They're just fantastic. I never had any issues with their hardware. So if you need a new computer, you want to run Linux on it, you want to support a company that contributes to Linux, click the link in the description and check out Tuxedo Computers. Anyway, you know where all the YouTube buttons are, you know where the comment section is, you know why you should click them, interact with that, whatever, you know how YouTube works. You also have links to support the channel in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!